Well, hey, everybody, it is so good to see you. Thank you for being here as we continue in this series, Don't Fall for It, or Life on the Light Rail, whichever you prefer. It's good to see you, though. For those of you who may be new around here, I'm Wolfgang. I work here, and it is an honor to get to be up here. But I will tell you, it's like one of the great rules of thumb. Never follow adorable kids on stage, right? I'm not set up for failure here, but you're going to have to bear with this for a while, so buckle up for the next little while. But I'm thrilled to talk about what it is we're focused on today, and I'm, of course, very, very glad to have you here. And one of the things, next month, I think, maybe a little bit, I'll celebrate 14 years I've been on staff here. One of the things I've loved about being part of this, yeah, that's sweet. That's sweet. One of the things that I've loved in so many ways over all those years has been getting to see what a unique blend of people North Shore continues to be. I mean, different backgrounds, different ethnicities, different generations that all kind of come together in many ways. And people make a big deal out of the differences between all these groups. Or say, for instance, generations, how different each generation is. And yet, for the purposes of today's talk, I was thinking about one particular figure who seems to unite the generations. Someone whose face is familiar and maybe even loved by all ages. I grew up with this face. My kids grew up with this face. Many of those little ones we just saw, they'll grow up with this face. See if you recognize this face. It's this guy. You recognize him, of course, right? Who is this? This is Cookie Monster, of course. And you're familiar probably with what is Cookie Monster's favorite thing in the world? It's tucked right there in the name. You could figure that out all on your own if you didn't know. And Cookie Monster has a fairly simple life motto. Anybody remember what it was? Here it is on the screen. See cookie, want cookie, eat cookie. Yes? Cookie Monster, not exactly a master of appetite management, but he's concise, which I appreciate. See cookie, want cookie, eat cookie. Here's why I bring this up. You may or may not agree with me. It seems to me, at least, we live in a see cookie, want cookie, eat cookie world, don't we? See car, want car, finance car. Right? See outfit, want outfit, buy outfit. See date, want date, get turned down by date, right? It doesn't always work. But the dream is that we will reach a point in our lives where when we see something appealing to us and we crave it, we will have the capacity to get it. That's the good life as defined out there, isn't it? It sums it up. You see something, you want it, you should have it. That's the good life. And that's what makes the subject of what Jesus is talking about in this little section of the Sermon on the Mount so absolutely bizarre to most of us. We've been walking our way through this amazing sermon that's recorded for us in Matthew chapters 5, 6, and 7, this New Testament account of Jesus' life. And I don't think it's an exaggeration to say that this sermon, this collection of teachings and words, the single most influential set of words in history. They've done more to shape culture around the world, I think, than any other collected group of teachings. Now, there are 107 verses, that's it, in the Sermon on the Mount. You could sit down and read them through in 15 minutes. But for centuries, people have been producing libraries worth of books, studying, memorizing, or at least admiring these amazing words. And of course, that's all great. But ultimately, you should know this about us at North Shore. We're trying to do more than just those things. We're actually trying to challenge each other to live this stuff. That's what this is all about. It's not just to nod and say, that sounds nice. We're actually trying to figure out how to live it. To be a community of people, not just talking about this stuff, but actually doing it. Whatever stage of life we're in. The Sermon on the Mount is all about, as we've seen again and again through these series, all about this idea of a new kingdom, a new way of life, the life that Jesus came to usher in and to make possible for ordinary people like you and me. And we've said again and again, there's a way things work out there. Kind of the standards, the definition of a good life, what what passes as goodness and so forth in the world around us. And then there's this life that Jesus invites us to. The Sermon on the Mount is this distillation of what it means to follow Jesus. And throughout it, he's inviting us to participate and join him in living this way of life, the Jesus way of life. That's what this is all about. And we've broken these 107 verses down into little subsections just to kind of tease out the key themes of each part. And as I said earlier, we call this series, this part of it, Don't Fall for It. Because in this section, Jesus is confronting the most common things that people think will bring them happiness and satisfaction and contentment in life. But if we're honest, having chased many of those things, most of us have, we've discovered they actually leave us unsatisfied and wanting. And to bring these things up, he talks particularly about 3 spiritual practices that were absolutely common in his day. Almost anybody who considered themselves religious participated in these basic 3 practices. This is kind of the first century equivalent of showing up for Christmas and Easter for people that are just sort of at that level, right? But Jesus, of course, is always pushing to the deeper stuff. And these practices that he mentioned, they have dotted lines to these areas that most people think will make them happy. So for instance, over the last couple of weeks, we looked at the earlier part of chapter 6 in Matthew, and we talked about this idea of our stuff. We explored what Jesus had to say about giving and generosity, and these texts specifically about giving to the poor. And it's all about what do we do with our material possessions. And so what Jesus is calling out is this popular belief that if you just have more stuff, that it will make you happy. And Jesus says, don't fall for it. Life is not just about getting more stuff. The second thing we talked about, a couple verses down, middle of chapter 6, in verse 5, Jesus is talking about praying. In that day, it would have been praying in synagogue, the Jewish equivalent of church, or maybe in public settings, those kinds of things. And this one Jesus calls out because it's so deeply related to our image, how we're perceived, what people think of us. And he's calling out this popular belief that if people see me praying or find out that I'm trying to be a good person, they'll admire me. They'll look up to me. They'll respect me. They'll like me, think highly of me. I'll be impressive. And Jesus says, don't fall for it. This surface image management stuff, trying to get other people to just like you, respect you, follow you on social media, it's not what life is all about. And then he comes to this last one that we're going to look at today, found in Matthew chapter 6, verses 16 and following. Here's what Jesus says. He says, when you fast, do not look somber as the hypocrites do, for they disfigure their faces to show others that they are fasting. Truly, I tell you, they have received their reward in full. But when you fast, put oil on your head and wash your face, so that it will not be obvious to others that you are fasting, but only to your Father who is unseen. And your Father who sees what is done in secret will reward you. Now, as I said, this one's a little bit different than the others, right? Because the other two are much more familiar to us. Right. No matter what you believe or your background, you probably have at least experimented or have exposure to the idea of giving. Maybe you've tried it. And most people at least have tried in some form praying, right? We're familiar with those ideas, but fasting? Not part of most people's experience. Or if it is, it's connected to some other kind of health goal or because they're getting ready for a colonoscopy or some fun thing like that. You know what I'm talking about? It's pretty much the extent of most people's fasting exposure. Not a positive association for most. But if you look at the lives of almost every great person of faith in the Bible, literally from front cover to back cover, Old and New Testament, you see fasting was a frequent part of every one of their spiritual experiences. People like Moses, and David, and Elijah, and Isaiah, and Esther. In the New Testament, people like Paul, even Jesus himself. This habit of fasting was part of their spiritual experience. And in our see cookie, want cookie, eat cookie world, we just don't talk about it. And yet here's a little interesting Bible factoid for you. Fasting is mentioned infinitely more times than baptism. And we practice baptism. In fact, we can't wait. In just 3 weeks on Easter, we'll be celebrating with those who are taking that beautiful step of being baptized, this picture of dying to our old self and being resurrected to new life. If you've not taken that step yet, that's your next spiritual step. We practice baptism all the time, but fasting, not so much. And because it's lesser known, let's just start with the basics, the fundamentals, okay? What is fasting? Some of you are actually wondering that. What's he talking about? Fasting is in the Bible, is generally related to going without food or drink for a period of time. It's making a change in diet for spiritual purposes. And it's far more than some crash diet so you can fit into your suit or your dress for your wedding. It's more than just a hunger strike. It's intentionally doing without food for a spiritual purpose. And there are different kinds of fasts that we see practiced in the Bible. There are times when people did without food, but they would drink water, or they would have juice. There were times when people gave up certain foods, but they would eat others, like sometimes people do in Lent. Maybe some of you are actually doing that in this season. And then there are those times when people go on an absolute fast, no food, no water of any kind. In fact, you could say the Bible talks about other kinds of things that you can fast from. And sometimes people make a distinction between fasting, which is food related, and abstinence, which is like abstaining from certain behaviors or other kinds of things. For the purposes of this talk, I'm gonna kind of blend those together. We can tease those out another day. For example, Paul talks about married couples fasting or abstaining from sex for a period of time. Some of you married folks have been fasting and didn't even know it. How about that? That's amazing. Let me just invite some of you married folks. It's time to break the fast, all right? It's time to break the fast. Anyway, my wife Lori made me promise no more jokes on this theme, so I'm moving on, okay? But I think we could think of other ways, other forms of abstinence or abstaining. I know of people who've done an electronic fast. They've gone for periods of time without their phone or without social media or without Netflix or turning on the TV or going online or anything like that. And for some, this might be a more appropriate form of fasting by abstaining from certain behaviors. Because there are those who can't and probably shouldn't do a food fast. Maybe for medical reasons like diabetes or hyperglycemia, or a major problem in our world that is so body image obsessed. If you struggle even the slightest bit with eating disorders and those kinds of things, fasting from food might not be the best practice for you. But there are still ways you can engage in this. All kinds of ways it can play out. It's saying, I'm gonna go without a regular part of my life, something I enjoy, something I think I need, and I'm going to offer it to you, God. As I said, common practice in Jesus' day. The most sacred holiday of the Jewish calendar happens every year in September. It's called Yom Kippur. It's the Day of Atonement. And part of that Day of Atonement commemoration, even to this day, for millennia, has been a 10-day fast of the Jewish people. Still today, people participate in it. They may not really practice the other stuff, but many still do this as part of their rituals. And in Jesus' day, every Jewish person would have done that. So there were big organized corporate fasts. There were also voluntary fasts that we have record of. People that would fast frequently and even twice a week or other longer times of different spiritual reasons. That's why when Jesus opens this section of teaching, he says, when you fast, not if you fast, because it's kind of a given. It's a common part of their spiritual lives. And of course, the same was true of the early followers of Jesus throughout the history of Christianity. And some of you may be thinking, as I'm kind of walking through this, you're like, why would anyone want to do that? I mean, maybe this is all new for you. Why would you be hungry and not eat, like on purpose? What kind of crazy idea is it to have an appetite that you don't immediately try to satisfy? This flies in the face of pretty much every message in the world, doesn't it? I mean, why would you ever deliberately deny yourself something you want? And that's why for a lot of people, fasting is weird. And I get it. I mean, as strange as it is, I first began experimenting with fasting when I started following Jesus about 35 years ago, and I was reading and seeing how frequent this was, how irregular a part this was of the people of God's experience over the generations. And I didn't want to, because like so many of us, I love food. I know this comes as a shock for you. I'll step out behind the table so you can see clearly. With this, you don't get this by accident, friends. You know what I'm saying? I love food. I love butter. I love cinnamon rolls and beef brisket. And we could go on, I think. Peeps, yes, I do enjoy a good peep. Slightly stale, thank you very much. I love sushi and cheesecake. Now, people sometimes ask, oh, Wolfgang, so what habits? What are your hobbies? Your hobbies? Well, I always kind of balk just a little bit because what I want to say is I love food. I love to go to new restaurants. I love new flavors. I literally have hundreds of hot sauces in my garage fridge because I like different tastes. I just want to try. I love experimenting with flavor, okay? I love freshly baked bagels with cream cheese and smoked salmon and capers. I love Top Pot donuts, raspberry glazed, baby. Dick's Drive-In, Mercury's Coffee. Please hold your applause. I love Orville Redenbacher and Betty Crocker and Colonel Sanders and Mrs. Butterworth and Chef Boyardee and my dear friend Little Deborah. These are some of my heroes. So fasting doesn't mean it's wrong to like food. Food is good. It was God's idea. Like taste buds were God's idea. He could have nourished us like he nourishes the plants, with like dirt and sun. But he gave us pizza. And you might want to write this down. Pizza is better than dirt. You could quote me on that in a t-shirt or something. You know what I'm saying? But in all seriousness, Jesus in the Sermon on the Mount, just a few verses before this, what's he pray? He says, pray, give us our daily bread. He knows we have cravings. He knows we have appetites. He knows that's how we're nourished. It's God's idea. Our appetites can be good things at their core. But our desires and appetites have got to be managed and even disciplined, dirty word, or they'll become our gods. Fasting is a sort of training to bring those impulses, those appetites under control. And let's just say it, we live in a world where for all our education and all our enlightenment and all our technological advances, some of the most brilliant people on the face of this planet spend all day figuring out ways to convince us that we are nothing more than a collection of appetites to be gratified. If you want something, you ought to have it, or you ought to get it, or you ought to do it. See cookie, want cookie, eat cookie. But can we all just admit that so many times in our lives, simply giving in to our every impulse or our every appetite to satisfy them at any cost can have disastrous consequences in our lives. Consequences relationally, consequences sexually, consequences financially, consequences physically, consequences spiritually. I mean, you just think in your own life, just you, honestly. Have there ever been times when you went with the see cookie, want cookie, eat cookie mantra, and it did not end well? I know people who've lost marriages, people who've jeopardized their health, people who've estranged themselves from their families, people who have train wrecked their careers. I know people right now in prison, All because instead of managing these appetites, they pursued them. See, unbridled see cookie, want cookie, eat cookie can have serious consequences. And yet, choosing another way is hard. Fasting can be challenging. I remember vividly the first time I tried it, I quickly realized how hungry I was, right? You'll never think about food more than when you're on a fast, particularly when you're new at it. And it began to teach me something. I realized how much my body insists on getting its own way. I began to learn about the kind of grip that food has on my life. It's still something I struggle with. And fasting is a little practice that God gives us to help us be in charge of our bodies instead of the other way around. So let's get real practical. How do we do this? Now, the time frame I first used when I began to fast was a 24-hour fast. I would begin at the end of dinner in the evening, and I would have it go through roughly what would turn out to be dinner the next day. I'd kind of skip breakfast and lunch and then eat the next night. Now, when I fast, I'm not just avoiding food, I'm making space to be nourished by God. Jesus makes this fascinating statement just a little earlier in the book of Matthew. Some of you likely know about Jesus was baptized after his baptism, but before his public ministry, he went for an extended fast. And here's what it says in Matthew chapter 4, verse 2. After fasting 40 days, catch that, 40 days and 40 nights, he was hungry. I sometimes think that may be the single most unnecessary verse in all the Bible. But he's not including it like because he's got a word count he's got to hit. He's including it because he wants to emphasize Jesus knows about hunger. He's human. He knows about appetites and impulses and cravings. Jesus is not a foreigner to that. So the tempter comes. Some of you know the bigger story, but here it is concisely just one of the scenes. The tempter says to Jesus, "If you are the Son of God, tell these stones to become bread." See, you deserve it. You're the Son of God. You got rights, man. You deserve to be happy. Who would ever it's wrong to even get in the way of that. Jesus answered, "It is written, man shall not live on bread alone, but on every word that comes from the mouth of God." And Jesus means this literally. See, because when food comes into your body, it just becomes part of you. It nourishes your physical body. Jesus is pointing out there's an even deeper hunger, an even deeper nourishment we can experience taking God's word into our lives, taking God's truth into our life. You see, Jesus knew food wasn't actually his greatest need, as hungry as he was. A connection with God was his greatest need. So fasting isn't just about avoiding food. In fasting, we discover we can feast on God. Fasting is feasting on God. We discover that these appetites that we try to satisfy in so many other things, whether it's food or drink or sex or stuff or entertainment, we discover God can satisfy those desires and impulses in a deeper, more satisfying way. There's nothing wrong with those core appetites. God's put them in us. But how we fill them will either draw us closer to God or they will push us away from him. And in fasting, I train myself to take these impulses and appetites and offer them to him. How should I handle this, God? You know I'm hungry in all these ways. How can you fill this? I learn to feast on God. I take his words into my soul, and I allow my body's hunger to remind me I'm not in control. This is way more than skipping a lunch or denying yourself your phone for a day. The goal of fasting isn't really fasting at all. It's learning about being dependent on God. Fasting is not some kind of magic or spell that makes us grow. This is not some sort of spiritual Wingardium Leviosa, all right? For my Harry Potter friends out there. It's a practice, a habit of putting ourselves in a position where God can step in and grow us in deeper ways, work in us. Secret's not to fast. It's not like we suddenly learn to pray better or that God hears us because we're hungry. Not at all. The secret is surrender. And for those who do this regularly, I know many of them, I've experienced it some myself, they will tell you their fasting days are some of their favorite days of the week because of the joy and life that comes from it. Because fasting does something much deeper. It reveals the hunger beneath the hunger. And in fasting, I discover how I might use things like food or drink or some other substance, some other experience to try to hide other kinds of cravings. You ever heard the expression, I eat my feelings? It's true. I don't just eat when I'm hungry. I sometimes eat because I'm afraid. And I want to feel comforted. I sometimes eat because I'm bored. Or, yeah, I feel the same way. Or lonely. I'm not sure what else to do. I just eat. And when I fast, I begin to discover those hungers beneath my hunger. But wait a second. I'm actually craving peace. I'm actually craving comfort. I'm actually craving reassurance or hope. I discover these appetites can be met in something other than food or drink or sex or success or the screen of my smartphone. Fasting has a way of revealing what's underneath. And when I discover what I'm really feeling is afraid or overwhelmed or lonely or worried, instead of turning to Ben and Jerry, I can turn to the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. Instead of turning to Ruffles and Hidden Valley Ranch, Wavy Lays just aren't as good. I can reveal these things I'm longing for before God and say, hey, God, can you satisfy them? I do not live on bread alone, but on every word that comes from the mouth of God. And maybe you're hearing all this and you're asking one of those questions that I used to ask when I was a kid, or I guarantee those parents we saw a minute ago, if they aren't answering it already, they will be soon. Anytime a parent tells a kid about something, you know what the kid response is? Do I have to? Some of you parents, you've maybe heard that question a time in your life, haven't you? Maybe asked it even yourself. Do I have to? And maybe you're wondering about this. Do I have to? Is this just some kick you're on, or is this commanded? You know, what's the deal? And I would just remind you, we've said this so many times right in the Sermon on the Mount. This isn't about rules. This is about rhythms and practices that help us get better and better living this Jesus life in a world that is so different. Not in an arrogant or self-important way, and not in a way to try to make ourselves look better than other people. Don't forget, that's what this center point of this verse is. Let's read it again, right? This is not about trying to impress people. Jesus said, when you fast, again, not if, don't look somber as the hypocrites do. They disfigure their faces to show others they are fasting. This is the first century version of duck face that we have right here. Imagine people contorting their face to try to impress others. Who'd have thunk? Truly I tell you, Jesus says, they've received their reward in full. But again, when you fast, not if you fast, put oil on your head, wash your face, so that it won't be obvious to others what you are doing, but only to your Father who's unseen. And it goes on. That stuff, sometimes I'd literally know people who felt like that's some sort of ritual formula. Oh, I must put oil on my head. I must wash my. That's not what this is. He's saying, take a shower. Basic hygiene. Wash your face. Don't call attention to yourself. Again, trying to impress other people. So it's not a have to, and it's not a show off. But when Jesus talks about fasting, he talked about it as something we would be doing once he left, before he's back. So here's the idea, simple challenge, invitation. We invite you to decide. Do some kind of fast. If you can, maybe fast just one meal. Close the office door, go to the park, put a video on for the kids, and spend that time you would have spent eating, praying, or reading one of the stories of Jesus' life, the accounts of Jesus' life in Matthew, Mark, or Luke, or John. Or just these 3 chapters that we keep, Matthew 5, 6, and 7, those 107 verses of the Sermon on the Mount. Or maybe you're up for a 24-hour fast, as I described earlier. Maybe go lunch to lunch and only miss 2 meals. So along the way, drink plenty of water, maybe even some fruit juice if there's blood sugar issues. You will feel hungry, but don't worry, friends, you're not starving. Most of us carry plenty extra. okay? Or you could go further and do a full day sunset to sunset and miss all 3 meals. I have a lot of friends who do that rhythm twice a week, every Wednesday and Friday, every week. It's just their routine, not just during Lent, all the time. Or go further, do longer periods, 3-day fasts, 10-day fasts. I've had friends who've done full 40 days of fast. They drank nothing but water and juice, but no food at all for 40 days. And if for some reason, as I mentioned earlier, food is not appropriate, the food fast isn't appropriate for you, consider fasting or abstaining from something else. Married couples, I'll leave the sex thing up to you, okay? But what about that electronic fast? What if you said this week, no Netflix, and just leave it off? For a whole day, I'm gonna leave my phone in a drawer in the dark hole that it belongs in, right? So what's the point? It's not to lose weight. It's not some kind of divine diet. And some of you like high performers, you're like, oh great, well instead of eating, I can work. I can be more productive, you know? That's not what this is about. It's taking that time to withdraw from your usual routine and put yourself in a space where you can encounter God. Being hungry doesn't magically make you holy, but creating space for Him to work makes a difference. The time you'd normally eat or watch TV or spend it praying or reading the Bible. You might want to journal during your fast. I often do that, because sometimes there's clarity that begins to come around an issue or insight into a situation. These are the kinds of experiences that are at the root and sort of the reward, as Jesus said, of fasting. So that's it. That's the challenge, the invitation. Spend some time this week, experiment with the power of fasting. Surrender food, your phone, something like that. All just to simply say, God, I want to grow. Or maybe begin to develop a real rhythm of this in your life. The point is not what you're giving up. It's growing in your dependence on God. It's coming to discover that you can feast on the beautiful truth that you are seen and loved by the creator of you are seen and loved by the creator of the universe. He knows your needs and cares about them. You are not alone. You are loved. And you begin to find that that truth fills you up in a way nothing else ever can. And you'll get better and better and better at it. Anybody hungry? I don't mean lunch, we'll get there. There's something deeper. Jesus says, come to me. Jesus says, I am the bread of life. I am the living water, he says. Come, eat, drink deep, be satisfied. You are loved. And he can nourish and satisfy your soul like nothing else. And so